Alright, abusia mu bibi akwaba na yom family mega TV and platform we eso. Abusia Kwadwo Poku one of NPP communicators na wagine ni so. Said ye Kwesi Pratt, Uncle Kwesi Pratt Jr., veteran journalist, watono boase a schooling on soul sourcing. Soul sourcing. MPP for actually mu munyanti bida. MPP for see soul sourcing that word no. Omunyanti bida. Inti afei ena abafo anasa abamono edi amomo ena Kwesi Pratt se on de sa de unya abotere ntrase obekirikiri ni wo ampa so Kwesi Pratt atono boase akirikiri ni mu papaapa amono ankasa te ho no wahu se hypocrisy na ewo mu no eboa na mmom se biebu se benya ado politics se wunya akonya sunwuman kwampa so yanko na yenkotie enkomo no bi se de Kwesi Pratt Jr. otono boase eschooli MPP Kwadwo Poku after say hopes na doye a clash with him no wasan a school in bio yinti yakobe betwaso
the impact on history on current developments. But see, the first point I'd like to make is that this resolution is not being tabled by President Mahama alone. You understand? It is not even a Ghana resolution which is being tabled.
It's an African one.
Because at the last summit of heads of states of the African Union, all 55 heads of states endorsed the resolution. It's gone beyond that. It also went to CARICOM.
Okay.
And all the countries, member countries of CARICOM, have endorsed it. So it's an African Caribbean resolution which is being placed before the United Nations General Assembly. And has tremendous support. I mean, yesterday I saw the open forum at which Reverend Sharpton and so on, all of them spoke, you know, in support of this resolution. So this is a resolution which has worldwide support. I mean, everywhere. I personally, last year, wrote a letter to about 100 members of the European Parliament on this subject. And Moro, you'll be amazed about the responses I got from members of the European Parliament.
Interesting.
Who see this as a worthy cause. You understand? Yesterday you heard the deputy representative of Colombia at the UN, you know, Security Council. And he made a rousing speech by his father. You know, by his president. We had a rousing speech. In fact, Reverend Sharpton actually made a statement to the effect that any African or anybody of African descent who stands against this big movement of the African people for justice must be an enemy of the African people. I'm sure you heard it. I'm not the one saying it.
I heard it very clearly,
So this is what we are up with. Now, one, President John Dramani Mahama was actually chosen, elected as the African Union champion on reparations for 1 year. Okay? His term came to an end last year. The African Union then decided that rather than have 1 year of focused actions demanding reparation and so on, we should have a decade. This is the African Union decision, that we have a decade of struggle for reparations and so on. Again, very significant. Now, it is also obvious that next year, President John Dramani Mahama,
John Mahama, for short,
will become the AU chairperson. And that's also largely because of the gains of the reparation movement that he has scored. You understand? For example, all of the West African leaders are unanimous in their decision that the AU chairmanship should go to him. So far, I haven't heard or seen any opposition to his becoming the AU chairman. You know, so that's very clear. Now, there's a certain basic misunderstanding of reparations, and that is what. You see, some people think that when you talk about reparation, it's about begging for arms. It's about begging for money. We are asking for money to pay for the crimes which were committed against us. My brother, I've made the point over and over again that no amount of money can pay for the crimes which were committed against the African people.
Right.
So the reparation movement is not about begging for money. No amount of money can pay for the crimes which were committed against us. The reparation movement is about resetting the world in order to give the African a voice, in order to end the degrading conditions under which Africans have to work and live today, in order to ensure that Africans would own their resources and exploit these resources for their own benefit. That is what the reparation movement is about. Now, listen, Moro. What were the crimes which were committed against us? And I've gone through a lot of literature. In fact, to be able to write my book on reparations, I went through tons of literature. The least figure I've seen, says that 12.6 million Africans were captured and used as beasts of burden to work in the Americas for hundreds of years without pay. This is the least figure I've seen. The analysis will tell you that for every African who was captured and enslaved, 3 others were killed. Because they waged wars in order to be able to capture these Africans and enslave them. So for every 1 African who was captured into slavery, 3 others were killed. So to get the figure as to the number of people that Africa lost, you need to multiply 12.6 by 4. 1/3 of which were lost, captured and used as slaves, beasts of burden and so on. And 2/3 were actually murdered in these wars of enslavement and so on. So we are talking about more than 50 million Africans lost in a space of about 400, 500 years. Can you imagine the impact of this on any continent?
It's huge.
50 million people killed. This is the crime which was committed against us. And then, my brother, you have to look also at the genesis, the legality, and so on. The legal justification for the transatlantic slave trade came from the Pope in 1452. And the legal document which the Pope issued is now referred to as the Papal Bull. In the Papal Bull, the Pope authorized King Alfonso of Portugal to go out into the world and to civilize people like us. And that if we refused to be civilized, we were to be killed. Our properties were to be seized, and our wives were to be taken. I mean, what can be more criminal than this? And civilization meant conversion to Christianity. That's what civilization meant. So if you are not a Christian, you are deemed to be uncivilized. And the punishment for being uncivilized was to be killed. Also, your property to be seized and so on. Then there was the principle of the vacant lands. You know, vacant lands. Our lands were declared vacant in order to justify both the transatlantic slave trade and colonialism. And you know why? The only way you can go and capture other human beings as slaves, to work for you without pay, to torture them, to kill them and so on, is for you to convince yourself that those other human beings are inferior. So the declaration of our lands as vacant lands was part of a grand scheme of things to declare us inferior. If you saw land which was occupied by snails and grass cutters and so on, you consider that as vacant lands, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
It's only when you saw human beings like you there that you would assume that the land is occupied.
Right.
So the declaration of our lands as vacant lands was because they didn't see us as human beings like them. And that gave them the moral justification, or they think it gave them moral justification, to take over our lands, to do what they did with us. and moral. Listen to me very carefully. In this period, our forebears did not just work for free to lead to the accumulation of wealth, which became the basis for the development of the Western world today. Their skins were used to make bags and shoes. And can you imagine the level of this atrocity? In the same way that you use sheepskin and python skin and so on, cowhide to make bags, our forebears had their skins used to make bags, leather accessories for the slave owners. Unbelievable. This happened to us. I mean, if you watch the forum in New York yesterday and all the descriptions of the things that happened and so on, why? If you buy a cow, if you buy a goat, and the goat delivers, the baby goats are yours.
Yeah.
Under slavery, the same law which applies to goats applied to us.
Yeah.
So if the black slave gave birth, the children did not belong to him. Because the black slave himself was a property of the slave owner. So the children automatically belonged to the slave owner and so on. So many things. Look, today, if you go around Europe and so on, America and so on, you find museums. What do you find in the museums? You find in those museums the heads of our heroes. What civilization displays the heads of human beings for public viewing and profit? What civilization does that? And those who were killed, those who were beheaded, were our heroes who resisted our enslavement and resisted colonialism. They killed them and cut off their heads and took it to their countries to exhibit. You know, I can continue on and on and on about the atrocities. Look at what Belgium did in the Congo. In fact, the whole of the Congo was considered as the personal property of the King of Belgium. The King of Belgium used the Congo to extract rubber and other minerals and so on. It was upon that he built his vast wealth. Now, if the Africans were not able to deliver the quantity of rubber that the King of Belgium wanted, they amputated one hand. The next time they failed to deliver the quantity, they amputated the other hand. What is more terrorist than this? And so on. But we went through this. But most importantly, I mean, why we are calling for reset? You see, the United Nations was set up around 1945, after the Second World War. And it was set up to prevent war and also to develop mechanisms to ensure that the world did not suffer situations which could bring about war, like extreme poverty and so on and so on. Unfortunately for us, by 1945, when the UN was being established, there was no African at the table. Because the vast majority of African states were still under colonialism, were colonized, so we're not there. They set up this United Nations organization, which does not recognize the interests of the African people. That is why today, 1.4 billion Africans do not have any say in the UN Security Council. 1.4 billion Africans. We don't have a say. And yet, small countries like France and Britain have veto powers in the UN Security Council. This situation needs to change. We need to reset the United Nations so that our voices would matter. This is reparation. This is the agenda which is being pursued. This is what the resolution which will be passed in the UN General Assembly today should lead to, a reset of the world. And the reset of the world is not just about the UN Security Council. My brother, it's about the World Trade Organization. It must represent us. It must lead to the expression of African aspiration, the realization of the African aspiration. The IMF and the World Bank need to be reshaped and so on. We need to do that. So it's about reset. Now, one of the things that affected us, the transatlantic slave trade did to us, was that it devalued our spirituality. You understand? It substantially devalued our spirituality. We need to reset. You know, when I was growing up, and that's recently, the African drum was not allowed in the church because it was considered evil. You couldn't play from in the Catholic Church. Evil! You understand? It took great men and women like Bishop Kwesi Pratt and so on to fight for our culture to find expression in the church. It took the Mozambo, the creation of the Mozambo Disco Cristo Church, to make our culture, our religion, and so on, compatible with Christianity. Today, you see many Catholic priests, you know, they have kente motifs in their cassocks and so on. It's a recent development. You understand? When I was growing up, the Rich Hospital in Accra was a whites-only hospital. Yes. When I was growing up, the Accra Club was a whites-only club and so on in Ghana. Can you imagine the trauma that our people have gone through and so on? So we need to reset this world, and that is what this reparation agenda is about.
Wow.
And this is the agenda that, fortunately for us, is being led by President John Dramani Mahama as the AU champion, and will be pursued by him next year when he becomes chairman of the AU. In fact, a lot of people think that this radical move is by left-wing elements and so on. One of the most strident voices in Africa today for reparation is the government of Togo. The government of Togo is strident. I mean, the Togolese foreign minister, I met him in a conference in Algiers, you know, late last year. And he said that, look, if they will not listen to us, let's boycott the UN. We should refuse to go to the General Assembly every September and make speeches and so on. So what is the value? Boycott the UN. Let the world come to the reality that we are not part of this structure. And so this is the Togolese foreign minister. Yesterday, for those of you who watched the forum in New York, you saw President Eyadima sitting in there and so on. So this is something which has united the whole of Africa, our leaders, the diasporan leadership and so on. One of the most brilliant speeches I've heard on this matter is a speech which was delivered by Duruba bin Wahab. I don't know if you remember Duruba bin Wahab.
Right.
Duruba bin Wahab, who is now resident in Ghana, was a former Black Panther leader. And he gave a brilliant speech, excellent speech, you understand, on this matter. So the whole of the African world, either on the continent or in the diaspora, is mobilized behind this momentous demand for reparation. Look, there is no institution in the world which is prospering today which is not a beneficiary of the free labor of the African slave. University, church, financial institutions, all of them build those institutions on the back of our enslavement, on the back of our pain, on the back of our free labor. Take the Barclays Bank. Take the Barclays Bank. Who established the Barclays Bank?
It's not ABSA.
Yeah.
It's no more
The
ABSA.
Barclays Bank was established by the Barclay brothers. There were two brothers who were slave traders. It was established with slave money. You understand? Established with slave money. Take any Western institution. And sometimes they say things that are so annoying. We want our stolen artifacts back. And sometimes I don't even want to refer to them as artifacts. These were symbols of our spirituality. These were monuments of our leaders and so on, our heroes. And then they tell you that your museums don't have the standards that they have, and therefore, until you have attained the standards that they have, they will keep the stolen items. What effrontery! What effrontery! What is this?
And Kwesi, again.
Moro, is this show now today a history program?
It's
but I mean, at the end of the day, if we want to go into this history, then Uncle Kwesi, who's a Pan-African, you give him a one-on-one so he come and do history. No, but I mean, it's just becoming a history lesson.
Hold on, let me respond to
the importance of this conversation.
My friend.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's not important.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's not important. It's becoming a history lesson.
Look, the whole of the world has for some time, especially today, been focused on history. History today is a current affairs.
Which NDC cancelled in Ghana as part of our education is what? Yes, NDC cancelled history in education in Ghana. So what are we talking about? That history is what?
So what?
Yes, but my point is that history, if that time you had a voice in this country, you made the NDC, you sat and NDC cancelled history as part of curriculum. How are you now telling history is focus of the world? I'm not talking about that. You said history.
So our history is no longer important.
You cannot, Uncle Kwesi, sit here and talk about history when at the time you had a voice, you allowed the NDC to cancel history as part of our curriculum.
I allowed.
But you had a voice.
Oh, Master,
let's not turn this into a history lesson. Let's discuss better sourcing.
No, when you say he allowed,
but he had a voice. Uncle Kwesi, listen, he's my uncle. Him and Kwesi Baku, the kind of boycotts they've done in this country.
There is nobody in this country called Kwesi Baku.
Kwesi Pratt, Uncle Kwesi Pratt, Uncle Kubaku. So, you guys had the ability to boycott things and not make it happen. You did not do anything about history being taken out of our curriculum. Let us land on the history lessons and discuss.
Unfortunately, my counterpart here does not know what time it is. 55 countries in Africa, plus all the Caribbean countries, Africans everywhere are moving a motion in the United Nations today and say it's not important. It's just history. Are you not shocked by this statement? I am totally shocked. The whole of Africa, the whole of the diaspora, the Caribbean, is moving a motion in the United Nations General Assembly. Yesterday, the UN Secretary General made a speech at the forum. Presidents from the Caribbean, from Latin America, were all there, pledging their support. And he said it's not important. It's not worthy of discussion. Wow! That's stop.
Okay. So
can you imagine that Africans? So there are some Africans in this world who think that this is not an important matter.
Oh no, I don't think he said it's not important. He says we
should discuss more important things.
We've spent so much
this
time.
is just history. We should spend time.
No, you said history, and I said history for me. So if we talk about history in Ghana, you see, listen, I learned history in Ghana. When I found out that history was no longer a part of our curriculum, I wept that day. But it was a regime that cut out, because you know why? They didn't want us to know their history. You see, let's not try to make it look like all of a sudden people don't know history.
I just wanted to do this, just briefly on this. And it sort of ties in with the earlier comment you made about how some museums around the world will not even...
Are you going to encourage him again on this?
Just 2 minutes. No, it's very important. We'll not even accept some of the... We'll call it some of the, well, you don't want to use artifacts. Let me just use artifacts for now, for lack of a better word, in their museums, because they feel that the artifacts do not even meet the threshold. Yesterday, the president, again, I heard him in that speech where he talks about the fact that the U.S. administration was normalizing the erasure of history. And he says the trend that he wants could have a ripple effect worldwide. And this is what he means. Now, he says the U.S. president has targeted cultural and historical institutions, from museums to monuments to national parks, claiming some exhibits promote anti-American ideology. And this one is supported by Reuters. Now, his declaration and executive orders have resulted in the removal of slavery exhibits, the reinstatement of Confederate status, and other actions that civil rights advocates warn could undo decades of social progress. Now, it goes ahead to say that Black history courses are being removed from school curricula, that institutions are being instructed to stop teaching the full truth about slavery segregation and racism, and that books addressing these subjects face growing bans. Of course, there's a White House spokesperson who said that's not true, and that Trump has done more for Black Americans than any other person, than any other president, and he's praising his historic support from the Black community in the 2024 elections, and that he's working around the clock to deliver for them and make America greater than ever before. Well, that portrays the point you made earlier.
Well, I fully agree with President John Dramani Mahama. There's an attempt to erase, history.
Okay.
And I think that attempt needs to be combated, very vigorously. You understand?
Okay.
And we are not even talking about ancient history. We are talking about recent history.
Okay.
You see, me, look at me, in my lifetime.
Yeah.
It was a criminal offense for Black persons to sit in places allotted for white people in buses in the United States of America. When Ghana gained independence, Kwabena Ebele-Gbedema, who was the foreign minister, went to the United States of America and went to a cafe to buy coffee. They refused to serve him because he was Black. So we are talking about recent history. You're not even talking about ancient history. You're not talking about the days of Mansa Musa and so on. You're talking about recent history. Kwame Nkrumah's time. You understand? And anyway, my brother doesn't want us to discuss this matter.
All right, that's. I just saw a shouting in your shots. Anyway, Kwadwo,
yes.
You have thoughts? You have any thoughts to share?
Well, no. Well, the president is in the UN.
Yes.
Yesterday,
he's
he made a statement yesterday.
Yes, that's.
Well, that's good. I mean, the president is championing Pan-Africanism, which Uncle Kwesi is a full throttle member of Pan-Africanism, and we appreciate him for that. But whilst he was in the UN making a statement, his roads minister was also on the floor of Parliament making a statement, and that is captured on most of the front pages, and that is what I want to discuss.
Okay.
When we have a political party come into power, and in their manifesto, they preach and make it look like sole sourcing, procurement. That's what I want to use my time for. I want to use my time. I have nothing to say. I have nothing to say on that. So then I have nothing to say. That let's move on to the next topic. I have nothing to say.
You know how we do it here.
But the point is that that is more important because look, you finish at 10. It's 9. You're gonna rush it at the end. I have a break. I have a break and all that. No, I want to discuss this thing well so that the Ghanaians know that there is a party in power today which is whitewashing and pulling rules over our high. So let's discuss it. Whilst I have the floor, let me go ahead. No, it's not promised. You've done this before.
Kwadwo, I promise.
Okay, so I don't have any. Uncle Kwesi have done justice to the. I'm relaxed. But Uncle Kwesi have done justice to the story.
Okay.
Let's move on to the next topic.
Okay. All right. So let's now go to your favorite topic. And it has to do with procurement and sole sourcing. Uncle Kwesi,
No, there's no problem. Today, everything is about sole sourcing. You can't discuss anything. Let's go and discuss sole sourcing. But let's discuss it and see what is in it.
So let me read the story from today's. I'll look at the new crusading guide and also the daily guide. They've raised two different angles to this raging controversy about sole sourcing. In fact, the Ghanaian publisher has also reported it. So perhaps let me do the Ghanaian publisher, which is on page 3. Now, what is the matter in issue? The minority turns heat on big push deals. Now, calls for greater transparency in the implementation of Ghana's flagship Big Push infrastructure program have intensified as the minority in parliament presses government to disclose full details of contracts awarded under the initiative. Now, the demand follows concerns raised by investigative outlets, the Fourth Estate, which suggested that some contracts may have been awarded through sole sourcing. At a press conference held in Parliament yesterday, the ranking member on the Roads and Transport Committee, Kennedy Nyako Osei, emphasized that the need for openness in managing a program estimated to cost about 50 billion cedis. According to him, the public deserves access to detailed information about all contracts awarded under the initiative. This includes the identities of contractors, the specific scope of work assigned, and the cost per kilometer for each project. He noted that such disclosures would enable independent assessment of whether the projects deliver value for money. Transparency remains a cornerstone of good governance, Mr. Nyako Osei stated, stressing that open processes reduce suspicion and strengthen trust in public institutions. He further pointed out that the current administration had previously advocated higher standards of transparency while in opposition and should therefore uphold those same principles in government. The Minority Caucus indicates that once the requested data is released, it would benchmark project cost against industry standards for different types of roads, including bitumen, surface roads, asphalt overlays, and dual carriageways. This, they say, is necessary to guard against potential cost inflation and ensure prudent use of public funds. Now, the Big Push initiative, introduced by President Mahama during the 2026 State of the Nation address, is designed to accelerate infrastructure development, particularly in the road sector. Now, let me go to the meat of the matter. Now, the minority is insisting that Ghanaians have a right to know how resources are allocated. But the Minister for Roads and Highways, Governs Kwame Agbodza, has firmly rejected allegations of widespread sole sourcing. Addressing Parliament, he describes claim that over 70% of contracts were awarded through sole sourcing as false and misleading. He clarifies that only 44% of major contracts under the program were procured through that method, while more than 400 contracts were awarded through open competitive bidding. There's no abuse of the sole sourcing process. It is an exception and not the norm. Mr. Agbodza explains that the scale and urgency of the Big Push program necessitated a mix of procurement approaches. And he says in some cases, sole sourcing was used to accelerate project delivery and avoid escalating cost, particularly for ongoing or inherited projects. He revealed that several projects valued at about 14.8 billion cedis inherited from the previous administration had stalled due to funding constraints. Now, these projects were incorporated into the Big Push program to ensure their completion. Most of these projects would not have started if we had not adopted a faster procurement route. The minister also highlighted that sole sourcing is an internationally accepted procurement method under specific conditions, such as when extending existing contracts or addressing urgent national needs. He maintains that all procurement processes under the program comply with Ghana's laws and regulations. To ensure value for money, Mr. Agbodza outlined several oversight mechanisms introduced under the initiative. These include independent value for money assessment, stricter monitoring systems, and involvement of local technical agencies in project design and costing. According to him, allowing state institutions to handle design and costing has already resulted in savings of at least 5%. He further assured Parliament that payments to contractors are strictly tied to work completed. We have instituted a system where no contractor will be paid without the work done. Kojo?
Yes. You see,
what exactly do you find?
Let's make this clear and let's educate our listeners.
All right.
Under our procurement law,
right,
sole sourcing is allowed.
Right.
Selective tender is allowed.
Right.
Then competitive tender is allowed. In
Right.
fact, from section 38 to 41 talks about whether you want to do procurement through sole sourcing, selective tender, or open competitive tender, right? We have seen the NDC, when in opposition, bastardize sole sourcing. They have over and over and over made it sound and look like sole sourcing was a crime. In fact, in their manifesto, it appears twice in their manifesto. On page 5 of their manifesto and on page 130 something, page 136 of their manifesto. Now, in their manifesto 6.11, I'll read section 10. It says, review the Public Procurement Act 2003 to ensure value for money, transparency in the public procurement processes, and pursue procurement reform to prevent conflict of interest, insider dealings, politically exposed persons in award of contracts. Implement measures to curtail abuse of single source and restrictive tendering procurement. That is in their manifesto. Then the president, on 2 occasions, in 2025, SONA, right, State of the Nation, and in 2026, the Nation, specifically highlighted sole sourcing in his SONA. So it gives you the impression that the president, both in his manifesto and in his speeches, demonized sole sourcing and make it look like it is a bad thing or it's something of last resort that shouldn't be done. Now let's fast forward to what is happening today. We are told that there are 400 contracts given under the Big Push. So far, the government has given out 400 contracts, right? 44% of that 400 is under sole source. So you're looking at 176 contracts given out under sole source. Why? Nobody is saying that sole sourcing should not be done. It is the NDC that made it look like sole sourcing should be a thing of the past.
Right.
But in 1 year, they've given out 176 contracts, which is 44%, as you read out, of 400 contracts. So the question I ask is it that the politician, which is the NDC politician, the president doesn't believe in the things that he puts in his manifesto and the things that they say? And they go on to say that, you see the public notes that has been put out there by the NDC, right, to their communicators to now basically saying that, oh, everything which is sole source, everything goes according to procurement, is according to the Procurement Act. Yes. When you were bastardizing it in opposition, and you claim that the NPP had over 23 contracts sole sourced, and it was a bad thing, and you even go on to say that, oh, it was inherited and abandoned and blah 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 blah, right? He says all processes complied with the Public Procurement Act. Of course, sole sourcing is part of public procurement. So why bastardize it? Why were you making too much fuss when you're in opposition about sole sourcing, as if it wasn't part of public procurement? It is part of public procurement. And when sole sourcing is done, and you go through the public procurement process, which is section 41 to 45, you are now asked to make it public through the website of the Public Procurement Authority, their e-bulletin. So it is there. So when somebody says that it is publicly available, what, in the past when sole sourcing was done, it wasn't publicly, the details were not publicly available. So look, I just want this morning, the Ghanaians watching us, to understand that it's sad when today politicians like myself are having a problem with policy credibility with the general public. Do you know why? Because the public is beginning to feel that when you want power, you say one thing, and when you get into power, you say something else. Because the issue at the road ministry comes on the heels of what is happening at the Gold Board, where in Gold Board we are told that our agency to move an office, and through selective tender we are told that somebody is now procuring an 85-inch television for over 800,000 Ghana cedis. When you said so, it's a mistake. If you have done a public tender, you'll have seen that mistake when people were bidding. And when you go to what they talk about, conflict of interest, in their own manifesto, they said that transparency in the public procurement process and pursue procurement to prevent conflict of interest, insider dealing by publicly exposed person in the award of contract. Who are we told that the Gold Board tender went to? When they did a selective tender, the company that owns, the people behind the company are the same people that own Weasel. And we are told that the deputy chief of staff is a director or a shareholder of the two companies. So in your own manifesto, the things you say you do in your manifesto, you are in power today and you are doing otherwise, because you've clearly stated that you want to put in place procurement to stop contracts being given to politically exposed and insider dealings. So the most important thing that I want to talk about this thing, and it's very important, is that if we are not careful as a nation, we are losing the general population, because the political class is beginning to be seen as talking, bastardizing everything that the opposition does, only to be elected into power and do the same thing. Everybody is trying to justify that, oh, but sole sourcing is according to Public Procurement Act. Yes, we know that. So if you knew that, why were you bastardizing it when you're in opposition? The other thing that everybody needs to understand is this. When you now come out and say that the big push, the Fourth Estate issued a statement saying that 107 contracts were issued. Now, 81 of the 107 were given out on sole source to the value of 73 billion Ghana cedis. And all the newspapers are saying the NDC rebuttal is that, oh, it's mischief, it's mischief. What is the mischief? Where the fourth estate story, where is the mischief? They are even saying 81. The minister himself is saying that 44% of 400. So even isn't 81 lesser than the 176 contract that has been given out on source. And I want to, in the coming days, do a RTI to the Public Procurement Authority to find out from them which companies were these 176. Because one, the Act 38, the Act 38 to 41 tells you under which conditions you can do sole source or single source. You can do selective. We want to find out, one, if they are saying urgency, fine, urgency is fine. The companies that the contracts were given to, what are their capacities? These 176 contracts were given to Ghanaian companies. Fine, no problem. Ghanaians have got jobs. But what is the capacity, and do they have what it takes to execute these contracts? And those are some of the reasons why a public tender will now bring on board certain companies that you will now know that have the ability to execute these contracts. So look, I think the president means well. I don't know whether his ministers are not in sync with what the president is saying, but look, he's talking about reparation in New York. But what is important, that's why I asked my uncle to let's discuss this, is that everybody that talks about procurement mishaps, abuse of procurement, the first thing they go to is sole source or single source contracts.
Okay. Let me do this. Let me talk to you about the Kwadwo Business Forum. I'll bring you there.
I'd like to start with the words of my brother and friend in the studio. I want to use his words to start my contribution.
Okay.
You know, in his closing statements, he said something very profound. He said that President Mahama means well, and that his problem is that he doesn't know whether all his ministers are in tune with the president. This is remarkable. I mean, for a prominent opposition leader, one who actually aspired to become presidential candidate of his party and so on, to say that the sitting president means well, that's a huge statement, you know. And does not even condemn his ministers. Says he's not sure whether his ministers are in tune with the president. This is a very huge statement, you know. So that's where I like to start from. The other statement of note is that, sole sourcing is not a crime. There's nothing wrong with sole sourcing. It's not a crime. In fact, our laws allow sole sourcing. And I'm not the one saying it. It's my brother here who said that. That it's not a crime. It's allowed. Our laws allow it. It is legal and so on. He said it, not me. You understand? Now, his only problem is that once the NDC was in opposition, or President John Dramani Mahama was in opposition, he used sole sourcing against the NPP government. That's the only problem. But then, I listened to my brother again very carefully, and he read portions of the manifesto, which he insists used sole sourcing against his party in the campaign for the 2024 elections. And what those sections in the manifesto said was abuse of sole sourcing. Clear. These are not my words. I'm not the one saying this. He's saying that. That the manifestos actually condemned the abuse of sole sourcing. Not sole sourcing. So this is where we are. Now, interestingly, we are told that about 40%.
44%.
44%, we're told.
44.
44%.
44%.
44.
Let's be specific. 44%.
Master, let's say 50%.
Since you are being specific with my words, be specific with the numbers I said. 44%. It's very important.
No problem.
No, that's fine. I mean, you are being specific with my words, so be specific with the numbers too.
I will even raise the figure.
No, don't. Be 44. Just 44. It's very important.
44%.
Yes.
Fantastic. If you want, let's make it 44.
No. Be specific. You are being specific with my words, so it's okay. Be specific with my words. 44%.
Okay.
Which translates to 176 contracts.
Okay. So 44% of the contracts under the Big Push project
Yes.
But my brother, let's do a small exercise. Which are the projects? Which are the projects? They include Swami interchange. I lie?
Yes.
If I lie, just tell me that I lie. Includes Swami interchange.
Yes.
Includes the redoing of the Kratama motorway. If I lie, tell me, then I will stop. So if you look at the projects that my brother and friend is talking about, at least some of the most important contracts were awarded in the NPP era.
Which was being criticized. 23, let me clarify for 23 contracts out of the 176, which the NDC criticized that were sole source, is part of this 176. So you can take out 23 from the 76. So
when you disagreed when the NDC was criticizing this, you disagree with the NDC.
I disagree that what? No, I'm just saying that they criticized it and they are in and they've done 153 more. So why criticize it if you know you're going to do 153 more? So that's the point we are discussing.
Massa, I know what we are discussing.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that 23 of the contracts we are criticizing, how they were awarded by your government. In fact, when the NDC criticized the award of those 23 contracts, you said the NDC was wrong.
Nobody said they were wrong.
They were right.
No, of course, because sole sourcing is not against the law. You see, the issue
So they
that
were
don't
not right.
demonize, but no, because
So they were,
you are
were they
sidetracking.
right or they were wrong?
What was right? There's nothing wrong with sole sourcing. The MPP did not demonize sole sourcing. Listen, the Nanato didn't stand in Sona in 2 occasions and demonize sole sourcing. It was President Mahama who did that. And if you demonize 23 and you've done 153, how do you justify it? How do you juxtapose those two conversations? You demonize 23, but you come and do 153.
Massa, perhaps, and from all that you're saying, it is clear that you understand sole sourcing and the laws governing sole sourcing better than I do. And that is why I'm dwelling on your words.
I agree. You can dwell on my words, but you need to also juxtapose the two conversations.
So please, allow me to make
Please go ahead.
You understand? These interjections...
Oh, no, I'm not. Sorry, I won't interject.
Especially when I'm so weak and you are so strong.
Can you say that? Uncle Kwesi, stop that.
Oh, but you have all the facts. So please, I beg you, allow me to say what I want to say. You understand? Because we are so strong. So you are saying that 23 of those contracts were awarded by you, sole sourcing. Massa.
Yes.
And you have said that sole sourcing does not break the law. It is normal.
Yes.
It's lawful. You are saying that. So I started listing the contracts which you awarded, and so now the biggest contracts. You understand? The biggest contracts. Swami interchange, the redoing of Akratema motorway, and so on. You did it. You awarded it on sole contract. So when you were in power, you thought there was nothing wrong with it. Today you are not in power, there's something wrong with it.
I'm not saying there's something wrong with it.
Oh, so there's nothing wrong with it.
You see, that is why you're not averting. No. Because you're not averting the conversation. You see, you listen to me attentively because you've been able to quote a few things and a lot of things I've said. The point I'm making is that do not condemn, demonize something in opposition, come into power and do 3 times what you demonized.
Even if it is right.
So why did you say it was wrong?
Even if
why did you say it was wrong?
Me?
No, why did the NDC say it was wrong?
I fight with NDC.
No, but you are defending it.
No.
So what are you defending?
Master, I'm only testing
That.
for logical and factual consistency. That's all I'm doing. That's all I'm doing. I'm not taking a position. I'm just testing for factual and logical consistency.
Okay.
So you said that this award of contracts on the basis of sole sourcing was lawful. There was nothing wrong with it, and so on. Be consistent.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes, the consistency is not on the side of the NDC though.
No, but you be consistent.
I'm consistent. I have nothing wrong with it. But the NDC,
So
the conversation I am having today is that somebody put it in their manifesto. Uncle Kwesi, that's
Yes,
why
sir.
I quoted the manifesto.
Yes, sir.
But you said abuse. If somebody has done 23 and you come and done 153, you know you've abused the process,
of
right?
a good thing.
Of 1 year. Yes, but it was a good thing when you said it wasn't.
You
no, but the NDC said it wasn't.
23 of a good thing.
Yes,
NDC
and somebody has. I know when it was being done, they said it was bad.
Of a good thing.
No, they said it was an abuse. No, but they said it was an abuse.
Why are you complaining?
Uncle, see, did you mention abuse of the process? You mentioned it, right? Abuse of process.
What you read?
Yes, in their manifesto, abuse of process. Yes. So they thought 23 was abuse of process.
Yes, and you disagreed with them.
No, it's not my manifesto. That's their manifesto. They disagree with me. I don't disagree with them.
Oh, so
they are saying
that it was abuse of process.
No, I don't think it's an abuse.
So
I have done 23. No. I have done 23.
Yes.
They are saying that the 23. No, I don't think so because I've done 23. Fantastic. No, but hold on, Uncle Kwesi. The NDC are saying that 23 is an abuse of process.
Yes.
They have come and they've done 153.
Yes.
Which one is abuse?
Okay. But you disagreed with the NDC that the 23 that you had done was abuse of process. Was
not abuse. No. Was not an abuse. How was that an abuse?
You disagreed with them.
That what?
That 23 out of the 100 and something.
No, Uncle Kwesi, let's put this in this perspective.
You
are just saying that you want to do perspective and the words, the beautiful words that you use, right? The perspective of this is that there is a government in place today that was in opposition 2 years ago.
Yes.
They bastardized and demonized something. When somebody has done 23 of it, today there's 176 sole source contract on the table. The 176, 23 of it is from the previous administration.
Fantastic.
No problem. Yeah. The NPP government did not ask the NDC to do politics with sole sourcing.
Yes.
Nanado did not tell John Mahama, His Excellency John Mahama, that when he does his sonar on 2 occasions, he should hammer on sole sourcing being a thing of the past.
Fantastic.
He wants to minimize it. His words, the president's words is that I will minimize sole sourcing.
Yes.
Is 153 a minimization of 23? Is it? Since you are being impartial.
So is that your problem?
Yes, that's my problem.
Oh, okay.
When somebody says one thing and does the other, that's my problem.
Master, should I continue?
Yes, please.
And say what? He has said everything.
No, but you are defending, so defend it through.
Oh,
or you can't defend it. So back me on the call that politicians, when opposition, should say what they can do when they come into power. Back me on that call. No, but back me on that call, Uncle Kwesi. At least help me.
Has been a very difficult.
At least help me. Uncle Kwesi, help me on this conversation. Let's join hands, Uncle Kwesi. Let's join hands and back me on that for Ghanaians that when in opposition, do not say things you would rather do more when you come into power. Let's join hands on that.
Let me ring the bell. Let's take a break.
Listen.
No, we have to go now.
I beg you.
Uncles, we have to go.
Do you realize
we have to take a break?
The kind of punishment you have inflicted upon
No, there's no punishment. Uncle Kwesi, stop that issue. What I'm saying is that let's hold hands.
But anyway,
let's hold hands and move forward. Moro, let me say something quickly. Yes. And this is the point that I wanted us to discuss. You see, I have advocated for fuel prices not to be used as politics.
Yeah.
Because you, the politician, don't control the elements of fuel price.
Right.
Electricity, let's not use it as politics because you don't control the elements of what the electricity price becomes. I think one of the things that gradually now it has become that we should stop using procurement practices as politics because both parties, the NPP and the NDC, has basically come to show that there are agencies when they come into power, and they will always use the agency as a conduit to do selective and so sourcing. So we should stop it. So from going forward, I honestly don't want the NDC or the NPP to use that as politics because if somebody has done 153 today, right? The next Dr. Baumia government that comes in on the 7th of January 2029 will probably do 200. I don't know because of the agency of the day, right? So I don't want to sit here and say that we are bastardizing. If it wasn't for the insistence of President Mahama in 2 occasions in his Sona speech and in their manifesto that they keep hammering sole sourcing and demonizing, this will not be a topic.
Okay, so let me read this to you from Sami Jemfi.
Oh, Sammy is watching?
Who is a chief executive
Sammy is watching?
of Gold. He watches the show every day.
Oh, interesting. Okay, read his message and
Yes.
let's hear what he has to say.
Now, this is the thing. He says the deplorable state of our roads is one of the biggest national security threats we face as a country. Bad roads have claimed many lives through fatal road accidents, armed robbery, etc. I am reliably informed that the surveying, designing, and costing of big push road projects alone took the Ministry of Roads about 7 months to complete. Resorting to the National Competitive Tendering process for the award of these critical road projects would have taken another couple of months before the projects could even commence. This could have delayed the completion of most of the projects beyond 2028. Competitive tendering processes have in some cases lasted for months. A typical example is a competitive tendering process for the road toll project that has not still been completed in about a year due to its complexities. Section 40 of the Public Procurement Law provides for single source procurement method on grounds of urgency, among others, subject to the approval of the Public Procurement Authority. Thus, sole sourcing is lawful. The unjustified use and abuse of sole sourcing is what President Mahama and the NDC have always condemned. There is not a scintilla of evidence in the Fourth Estate publication that shows that the use of sole sourcing was unjustified or that there were any breaches of the law or abuse of the process. Neither was any evidence of the cost of the projects being inflated adduced by the Fourth Estate. In opposition, the NDC never said sole sourcing was a sin or unlawful. We only preached against the unjustified use and abuse of sole sourcing in the award of government projects, some of which were established by the Auditor General to be inflated. In fact, some of us cited audit findings of the Auditor General to show that sole source cocoa road projects, some of which were awarded to Bamia's brother, were inflated. In the case of the big push and projects, all projects that were awarded through sole sourcing received prior PPA approval, as same was justified on grounds of urgency. Value for money audits were conducted. The contracts were not awarded to a select few, but rather carefully selected multiple competent and experienced contractors with demonstrable capacity to complete the works on time. None of the contracts have been established to be inflated. The urgency of the projects cannot be denied, and like all road projects, payments are based on actual work done, certified by independent consultants. As a matter of fact, 23 out of 84 big push projects, such as Swami Interchange of Fanko, Insawa Medenta, Dodua, etc., are inherited road projects that were all awarded by the previous NP government through sole sourcing with no dedicated funding. This government has simply novated the projects, maintained the contract and provided for funding for them under the big push policy. The 23 road projects were not re-awarded. Yet the Fourth Estate had mischievously added all these projects to their list of sole source contracts awarded by this government. Clearly, they could have done a better job. So what is the point really? The NDC spoke against sole sourcing in the past. True. So every resort by the NDC to sole sourcing government must be condemned? Is that a logic being canvassed by the Fourth Estate and Poku?
Okay, so let's frame that. You know that beautiful message Sami Jamfi have sent?
Yes.
Please, let's cut it and frame it and put it on the wall.
Okay.
Because you know what? There is a lot of relativity in the conversation that he's having. He's on the seat now, right? And I'm surprised he didn't clarify the 834,000 for the.
But I'm sure he said
85. Please, Sami, please clarify that. The 800. Oh, sorry.
You know, he's still a national communications officer.
So he signed that as it, but it pertains to him. Since Sami is watching, he should clarify that.
Okay.
The 834,000 Ghana cedis for the 85-inch TV, was it for one TV or was it for multiple TVs?
Oh, it cannot be for one TV.
Yeah, but on the document that is public, it says there's no quantities. There's no quantity. Bro, Sami is watching. Let Sami help us clarify. He sent a message. I'm sure you clarify it right now. I'm saying that let's cut this Sami message and put it on the wall. Okay. Do you know why?
Oh, yes.
Because now that he is in power, he has the facts and he's telling us this. He was in opposition. Somebody was in power. The person told him this. He didn't believe it and he made those utterances. He should wait.
Okay.
When we come in January 7th, 2029, then we will look through the contracts that he's awarded and tell him whether they are justified or they are not inflated. Let's wait. But let's cut this for now. Let's frame this and put it on the wall.
Okay. J.C. Boakun is a political marketing expert. What is factual and politically consistent? You see why I always disagree with Uncle Kwesi. For the record, I'm watching the show live and on this same platform with Randy Abbey as a host of Good Morning Ghana on countless occasions where Uncle Kwesi constantly argued that the use of sole sourcing and restricted tendering undermines the Public Procurement Act. A few years ago, he reacted to the various procurement-related controversies such as this $1.7 billion sole source contract involving the Ministry of Finance. Again, in 2025, my uncle reacted to claims.
He's lying. All the things he's attributing to me are false. Never discuss them. You should stop doing this. Just sit in your office and just. It's not true.
All right. Alhaji Hamza from Pig Farm says, good morning, my brother. NPP as a political party,
it's not true.
what they're doing is that they could, NPP as a political party is doing all that they can to establish false allegations against this government. They are not happy because they have not been a single scandal against any appointee in this government. And for that matter, they are trying very hard to get one. I have listened to Kojo Poku, and the question I want to ask him is that, have they been able to establish any wrongdoing? So because of this, we should vote for Bawumia. Is that what he's telling us? They should give us a break. We have a country to govern. Andrew Ejapa Mesa, former MP for Sekondi, he sends this message. Now he says, the crux of the matter is, as far as I'm concerned, is that the NDC condemned NPP for using single source procurement for the execution of some urgent and necessary works. They described it as a means of stealing from the public purse and as a consequence corrupt. They proceeded to promise in their reset manifesto that when elected into office, single source procurement will be a thing of the past. They will amend the law to reflect that. The people of Ghana believe the NDC and voted massively against the NPP. The president re-echoed this in in the second SONA, that single source will be a thing of the past. To turn around today to embark on the same processes that they described as a conduit for corruption under the guise of agency is nothing short of not only betraying the trust of the people, but also disingenuous. Now, if the framers of the new law, if the framers of the law intended for every government to finish all projects started within the tenure, they need to go through competitive tender process, as the norm would not have been included in the law. Let no one throw dust in our eyes. 179 single source contracts in the logic of the NDC is nothing short of corruption. This is not what the NDC promised Ghanaians. Now, Duke Anyimedu says, good morning. Is Uncle Kwesi saying that he never attacked sole sourcing under the NPP? He wants to know. Professor Ashikwe from Asylum Down says, Kojo is one of my favorites. Now, when in the course of the show, he became vehemently restless and vociferous, introducing the big push topic over and over again, overlapping other very important topics, I was thinking that there was going to be some serious revelations over some corruption dealings. Moro, Ashok Small is much ado about nothing. Remind him that comparing numbers marks a wicked and deliberate attempt to trivialize the big push. Big push is nothing close to the concerts that have happened in the past. This is a big deal. I like the fact that he praises JM. Interesting times. That's from Ashikwe. Tafai Namrahan says, good morning, Moro and your guest. How do Ghanaians don't care about the NPP MT demands? They are only interested in seeing their bad roads being fixed. How do, whether their contracts were awarded through sole source or open tendering, Ghanaians are happy to see their roads being taken care of by a responsible government. Mystic Wonder Vuko, inside in Sawama Joji says, Assalamu alaikum, brother. For now, for how long this mini micro minority continue to organize needless, fruitless press conferences? We need a credible opposition party that will not be opposing everything for opposing sake, but rather put the government on its toes, provide alternatives and spare our ears with this cacophony. Never again to this nepotistic nation wreckers. Samuel Brian Boabeng says that, Moro, I have decided not to repeat the conduct of members of the NDC towards President Akufo-Addo. Conduct I found deeply uncomfortable and wholly condemnable for anyone who occupies the highest office of the land. This is why I have chosen to slow down on many fronts. Yet the hypocrisy of some enablers of President Mahama makes restraint difficult. Now, when Nana Akufo-Addo first championed reparations for Africa, the United Nations, and condemned the transatlantic slave trade, he was vilified and mocked at home by the NDC and some members of the government WhatsApp group. Today, those same voices celebrate President Mahama for advancing a position they once ridiculed. Is it because it was Nana Akufo-Addo then? That is not principle. This is convenience. I vividly remember one of the former friend of brother in government writing on this timeline, after all the IMF, COVID-19, gold, oil, cocoa, timber, bauxite, etc., money stolen, you, President Akufo-Addo, still want reparation money to steal? As Hamlet might lament, frailty, thy name is, but here it's not frailty, it is inconsistency. Principles, where art thou? Samuel Brian Boabin sent that message. Duke Anyimedu is back. He says, in fact, President Mohammed's second SONA was just a month ago. While he spoke and touted that sole sourcing won't happen under this government, it had already happened. What sort of leadership is he serving Ghana? Please ask Kwesi if he's comfortable with this. Now, Prince Henry, who is Prince, you said you're aspiring for the Eastern Regional NDC Communications Office or something like that. Anyway, I can only wish you well. Prince Henry says the NPP is just a nation record simple. It's just a nation record simple. Same people used our money for needless national cathedral, and they still have the right to talk about it, to talk again now. The NPP that scammed God of building national cathedral for him and later turned the place into a crab hub has the nerve to call the NDC government a scam. May God help keep the NPP in opposition for more than 32 years. Amen. That's come from Prince Henry from Koforidua. Now, Edie Mukhtari says, please ask. Now, Edie.
The amen. Was it from him or from
no, it's
you?
from him.
Okay.
Oh, no,
I just want to be
can't
sure.
say
I just want to be sure.
Oh.
Because you said it and said amen.
No,
so I was wondering whether amen was from you.
somebody's Charlie.
Okay.
I'll only say amen if the message says you.
No, the way you said amen.
You for be rich and we made a running mate, then I say amen. But the other one, Kojo! Kojo!
Read the message.
Anyway, so Edie Mukhtari says that please ask Poku whether he knows that his Ashanti Regional NPP chairman, Wontumi, was awarded 20-kilometer Cocoa Road at a cost of £45 million, which wasn't executed during the NPP government. Is it pounds or dollars? It has to be in dollars. Secondly, another Cocoa Road contract awarded to Dr. Mahamir's direct blood brother, which he never executed. Was those contracts so sourced or was on competitive tendering? The NPP should stop searching for problems when there is none. The NPP should sit down to reflect and strategically reorganize themselves and their party. Other than that, what they're doing currently is they are dwindling deep down and causing even more harm. Okay. Now,
on the 85-inch TV.
Which one is that?
Sammy, I asked, he's watching.
No,
I asked him.
He hasn't responded.
He hasn't responded.
Yes,
okay.
Yes. So Edward Kariwe, who's the General Agric Workers Union, says hello to everybody. He says he's enjoying the conversation. And then also, let me look at this. And then Martin Yesi as well, who's the former Minerals Commission boss. He said I say hello to all of you and that he's enjoying the conversation. Now, Kojo Chumbafu is back. He says, again, Kojo Poku brings us to Standogbe. Where was he when the NPP justified Ken Ofori-Atta collecting loans on the balance sheet of Ghanaians and collecting percentages on the loans he collected? Did Ken Ofori-Atta not tell us in Parliament that his company had made over 150 million cedis in commissions on the loans he had collected on our books? Where was Kojo Poku then? Please, Ken Ofori-Atta is still at large trying to get citizenship from another country to escape accountability. Why aren't you talking about that, Kojo? Said, did the Akufo-Addo not do politics with sole source in 2016? Why aren't you saying anything? Did Kojo Poku only emerge after 2016? Now, this one here, that Sani Saliu says, culture may be our heritage, but factors like people's tastes and preferences, dynamism to curb stasis and monotony, and the new era have helped to either shape or modify it to suit us. The Hausa hat, for instance, was originally made by hand, but now majority of them are sewn and they're beautiful. Let's encourage ourselves and go with the flow. Stealing ideas isn't bad at all, especially when they're improved upon. Alas, the discussion around sole sourcing championed by the fourth estate and the minority is much ado about nothing but an ugly cacophony that jars our ears. Good morning, Sandy Saliu sense that. Carlos from Odododio says, please remind the MP presidential candidate that if he's talking about bastardizing processes, he should reflect on what Nana Akufo-Addo said in 2016 before the elections, especially regarding the sole sourcing, and compare that to what they actually did while in government. What the NDC is saying is clear. Where sole sourcing is used, it must be justified and done properly, not for personal benefit. The concerns being raised are about conflict of interest and the inflation of contract values. However, in this case, there's no evidence of inflated contracts, nor is there any indication that a family member is connected to the contract. He should carefully examine the issue before speaking. At the moment, it appears he's speaking without a proper understanding of the matter. They are trying hard to find fault with this government, but have been unable to do so effectively. As a result, they jump on any allegation they hear without proper verification. This approach weakens their role as an opposition meant to hold the government accountable. It is quite disappointing, Carlos, and I say, God bless you. Now, this one here from Reverend Samuel J of the PNC says, good morning, Moro, and your panel. Moro, concerning the way our ancestors were treated, if you have the opportunity to certain place in America where such brutality took place, I tell you, if you're not careful, you would hate the white forever. I am confident Africa will be able to achieve much from this initiative. Moro, touching the national issues as much as MP have the right to come out boldly, I will be very grateful if they take their time to sit back for some time and study situations very well. Their performance is so fresh in our minds. Have a nice day. Anyimedu is back. Duke, he says, please tell Kojo Chumbafu that Ken Ofori-Atta's data bank was making money through commissions from government borrowings right from the Rawlings, Kufuor, Mills and Mahama 1 era. They didn't start making money on government borrowing under Akufo-Addo. Mansa Musa says, just a good morning to Kojo Poku and senior brother Kwesi Pratt from Mansa Musa based in London. Now, Tafan Amreha says, good morning, Moro, and your guests. How would you call Ghanaians don't care about the NP demands. They are only interested. Okay, I think I've read this already. And then let me end with this one finally before we go. So Moses Gbawe, I believe, he says that as a retired public sector auditor, I have worked with the Public Procurement Act for years. I'm surprised that after 23 years, we have not reviewed the act to close the loopholes that both governments have complained about when in opposition. The 2016 review did not address the flaws. The law still has loopholes even when using competitive tendering. For example, it is possible for one person with controlling shares in 3 or more different companies to tender, and one of those companies with win. It is even worse than sole sourcing. Even with competitive and restricted tendering processes, it's possible to tilt the processes in favor of a preferred tenderer. All right. Now, Musa Abatwa says that, from Musa Abatwa and Asawasi says, Baraka Salah, Mr. Poku is sounding like more Catholic than the Pope. It's quite disappointing to see NPP are sounding like confused opposition. If they think that
Entimi makacho MPP for the sometimes omutimi ye nimebu honoma odwenwa wonti ase. Yeti Ghana hanom yehu enema bebre MPP for ye ya Ghana for ekaye omontie even international world and as international amama ye twa ehunhia MPP for ye enema bebre ana omobo omokoko omontie how come say ne so sourcing eye MPP for at the mono? How come say so sourcing the word so sourcing eye MPP for at the mono? Because of nyatwim. Because of what? Nyatwim. Because of say omaye omadwene na omwesi omadwin pi. So omunye den omo nka no kware. Because you kuruma NPP for edi atro enada ebeji omanwi bra kufado edi Dr. Alhaji Bomia eba omo kasate se abofo Muhammadu Bomia ni nyanse nyina ye ni tim ma Muhammadu Bomia so ba ya Professor Jambafo nyanse nyina ye ni tim ma abusia ewie akira yente hwe ewie akira dollar na achichiri unipa ahye baabi ewie akira a lot of things happening. What you say? Enti sometimes enyeme bu ho no ma me hwe MPP for na so mo ka ho asema me bisa me ho se anya nkofo wo ya no mu fura ban mu 2 years 3 years nyamba yi but omo behave as if say omo wa ban mu no omo ye niema papa omo di niema papa gu akwan mu omo di niema papa gu akwan mu eno ena masa ambre omo repu what this. But sometimes ubisa ho say enti MPP for we anya ye ni omo no omo tikuru mu omo ye bibia na omo kunkun e ka kire omo no mu mfi no. See hwe Kwadwo Poku owo opposition na hwe ne kasaye even when he is in opposition and when me article bi minim say ye no kware dia na na bi ono nya ho de NDC ene Dwom Hama say so munim na omo arrest omo nipa bia ebe bladi. I don't know say no kware dia I don't know, but san article na ekire na bi in question John Dramani Mahama bontoa ebo ni din ka say omo ba no mo nya obi ankere kora na na bi abokoro no into omo be kire. Since MTC by yenye hu se na bi omo invite no se omo invite na osumasi o ene yenhu se okotu ani sika o ene yenhu. And this is what I've always been saying about NDC for. Se mo anhwe ni mabiye na mo ni MPP for ne ye katasumo mu aso baabi na mo no mo ye ba kwa he mu fura ban mu a omo ba omo betwe mabo so. Me na meka kire mo. Nhwe ade a enka former Attorney General Godfrey Dodame any Chief Justice Madam Tokonu omo fa so anka omo di jeli atofo osen kwan omo fa so anka jachi Kwesi omo ye den omo jeli na Akufo-Addo ka ho bi Akufo-Addo sisi obi ye jeli ni ye to abama no. See how omo di Opunin Dr. Opunin fa so hwe said omo di photo e fa so hwe kwan a omo di a lot of your members e fa so in opposition. Enti se mo maba na se mo nso mo ntimi anya de papa na se mo make sure say the NPP for be ye no mo be boy no, you will let them pay for it. Na se mo tenase na se mo tenase na mo ni omo edi nakra na mo ni omo kata so na mu aso a ye ka kire mo emre bi beba se mo fro position a some fee is your target. And I've told you se mo nhwe yi a enkofo bi ni wo mo party ni mu a se mo fro position mo ye mistake na mo fro position a mo party no some enkofo no ma target you, and they will try as many as they can to tarnish your image. Mo party no, they will try as many as you can to tarnish your image. And ye kind of crash them, ye be mo a I know sometimes mo green say bia na ye bo party na ye momochi, but ye kind of crash them, ye pese mo hu se aba maba no e Ghana fo na e de mo bae, ye pese mo hu se ba maba no Ghana fo ye ni abere, ye pese mo ba na mo ba ma accountability ye adwuma, ye pese MPP fo na omo etena ban mu wi Ghana sika, omo tena ban mu di omo ani sika nyafunyafu no, mo be make sure say they will pay for it. Na mo ni omo koka na se mo kwaji no kakra o baby ana se mo koye sa priba gaining ne Ghana fo ye hu a ye de azumi say ye hu hwe corruption cases no mo fight. We are going to take action on the election day 2028 December 7th. We are going to make sure say ye be take action on that. Inti ye kind of crash them MPP for mo hwe ni mayi MPP for mo make NDC for mo make sure say MPP for omo bia wabokro no bia no he or she will be prosecuted. Chira wadwon comment section nim. Enti Kwesi Pratt Junior any MPP Kwadwo Poku na yekutie omo abusua like dwumadie we share na afoforo enye bihwe. Makra bye bye.